It's great to welcome to the program today Glenn Loury, who's professor of economics at Brown University, the Paulson Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and also author of the forthcoming memoir, Late Admissions, Confessions of a Black Conservative. Glenn, I really appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Thanks, David. I'm very happy to be here.
I am not an expert in many of the issues where I've seen you weigh in over the last years, but nevertheless, I'm interested in learning more about your perspective, and hopefully the audience is able to do that as well. I've seen you often comment about the cultural and family issues that you believe affect the status of Black Americans. I've seen you make that commentary with great interest. I share those same concerns, and yet I can't help but think that some of the policies that the modern left proposes, reducing sentences, decriminalizing drugs, intentionally reducing the prison population, dealing with pretrial detention, which makes it more difficult to mount a good defense and separates people from families. It seems to me, as a non-expert, that some of the policies being put forward by the modern left might help deal with or ameliorate some of the issues you're concerned with, that I genuinely believe you're concerned with. Why not? Where am I misunderstanding what those policies might do?
What are the policies that you have in mind of the modern left that would ameliorate the concerns I have about family structure and behavior in Black communities?
Well, many of the ones I mentioned would do more to keep families together, which seems to be one of the concerns that you have as a cause of some of the problems. So again, the decriminalization of drugs, which is disproportionately used in certain parts of the country in order to imprison people, reducing sentences, dealing with pretrial detention, which keeps people sometimes for months or years in the state of limbo in jails, unable to really mount a defense, and putting them into the justice system. These sorts of things, again, they seem, and if I'm just wrong, I want to hear from you, they seem like they may help keep families together, which is something you're an advocate of.
Yeah, I'm not persuaded by that.
Okay.
In fact, I think the reason that you're having so much involvement in the criminal justice system in certain parts of society is because families are not together.
Mm.
I think the arrow points in the other direction, rather than the arrow pointing from criminal justice policy, pretrial detention, or whatever, to connection between parent and child, between man and woman. Rather than the arrow pointing in that direction, it points in the other direction. It's the failures of family that have led to the failures of socialization of young people that have led to the behaviors that end up getting them into trouble with the law.
So you see a
So
different
no, I don't
causality,
I
it
don't
sounds
think
like.
so. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
You see a different causal direction in terms of this.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to say, didn't the generous welfare policies, didn't the cultural change away from affirming family, religion, and conservative old school values contribute to the problems in the cities? But that's what I think. I think we just celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day here. Um, he was a Baptist minister. He was an old school Christian, as well as a profound critic of the racial hierarchy order, but he had a commitment to a certain set of values. And that's where I think the buck stops, not with how cops chase robbers, but with rather how people define what is the meaning of their lives and what is a right way of living.
Given where we are today, I'm curious about what set of policies or prescriptions do you think would be useful? If you had your say, what would someone with your perspective say? Here are the interventions I think we need, and at what level do we need them to resolve the issues you've been sort of signaling?
I think we need leadership, and I think we need vision. I'm not so fixed on policies. I don't think the government is the answer.
Hmm.
Let me put it that way. I don't think politics is the answer. It's not as if I don't have policies, but I mean, I don't have anything new to put on the table. Uh, General principles, I would say empower people at the closest to the grassroots and local level that you can. Give them choices. Yes, give them resources. So it's not as if I'm, just let everybody take care of themselves kind of guy, but give them choices. So, for example, in education, which of course is bedrock, I would expand the capacities for people to be involved in securing for their children the benefits of a decent education. I wouldn't subcontract that to a union.
Hmm. Would you
The kids, the
subcontract it
kids, the,
to,
the kids do not belong to the employees of the state.
certainly, would you
So
subcontract
so the
it, Glenn,
resources
to a
that
religious
supports
private school?
that would be a person's choice. I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't subcontract it as an act of policy to endorse the religious conviction, but people will find their way to various sources of authority and meaning in their lives, and religion will certainly be one of the things that they will choose as they do that. But I want to go back to this law enforcement thing.
Yeah.
You don't like, I detect pretrial detention and all of that. And I'm not advocating for
It's not that
pretrial
I don't like
detention.
it, but it's not that I don't like it, but I don't know that my view is quite so relevant. I think in some cases it's applied unfairly relative to the accused crime, and it becomes an impediment to actually mounting a better defense in the first place. But it's not that I, period quote, don't like it.
Okay, fair enough. And I take that back. What I just want to say is I think managing the problem of public safety in urban areas is difficult, not easy.
Right.
And I think there are trade-offs. I agree that the rights of a person who's not been convicted of anything are tread upon when they're detained for want of being able to post a bond or something like that.
Yes.
And that's an issue. I agree with that's an issue. But what is also an issue is when someone commits a crime, they commit a crime. They are allowed to walk on the streets after having been apprehended for committing a crime, and then they commit another crime. Now, the system has to respond to the public's demand that that not happen. So if you're the decision maker and you get rid of pretrial detention, you're literally taking people's lives into your hands on behalf of this ideal of the rights of the person who's accused. And I just say it's a hard problem. That's all I'm saying. I think the call would be a difficult call.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. You mentioned that this is to a great degree about vision and leadership and less about policy and politics. Do you see any specific individuals that you believe have the vision and leadership for the approach that you want to see?
Oh gosh, I'm not going to name a politician. I'm not going to say something like Barack Obama.
Well, the question is anyone offering something? I mean, so if it's not about politics and it's about vision and leadership, I mean, is there anything you point to where you say, I think this is the right direction. This person has what it would take, for example?
I can think of some of my heroes. Robert Woodson is one of my heroes. He's a conservative African American
Hmm.
activist based in Washington, D.C., who promotes grassroots empowerment of people along a number of different dimensions. He's been around for a long time. You could look him up, the Woodson Center. Uh, Ernesto Cortez is another one of my heroes. Ernie Cortez is based in Texas and California. He's running the Southwest Industrial Areas Foundation, which is an organizing group in the spirit of Saul Alinsky. And he's a man of the left, and he's committed to a kind of social vision that I wouldn't necessarily endorse myself. I'm a little bit more conservative,
Hmm.
but I've interacted with his organization, and I can tell you that uh, uh, they are doing good work on the ground in communities throughout the Southwest of the country, and I appreciate it. I was once in a hotel ballroom in San Antonio where his organizers are trying to pressure local politicians and local employers to get the community college curriculum coordinated so that the people who went there and took these courses could then be certified to take on high-paying jobs in the companies.
Mm-hmm.
There were 500 people in this ballroom at this gathering with the politicians sitting at a panel up in front. All of them had the same T-shirt on, which was advertising their movement. He had organized these people to be a force, to be able to get the attention. I mean, I just love that. And that's just one example of what Ernie Cortez does. He's one of my heroes. Ian Rowe. Ian Rowe is an African-American charter school entrepreneur in Brooklyn, the Bronx, low-income kids of color. He's got a baccalaureate high school curriculum that he stood up, and he's hundreds of kids going, and they're getting a really good education. He got his senior class of kids an audience with Justice Clarence Thomas recently at the Supreme Court. Just what a wonderful field trip for these kids. Anyway, so, okay, that didn't add up to a political program, but those are people whose work I admire.
Yeah. You mentioned Clarence Thomas. I mean, listen, since you mentioned it, I guess I'll ask. Your friendship with Clarence Thomas is a known entity. I haven't been able to find you saying anything too definitive about some of the allegations about the gifts from Harlan Crow and the loan that was forgiven for the RV without disclosure. Do you think he did anything unethical at this point based on the allegations that are out there?
No, I don't think he did anything unethical. I'll just say that baldly. Nothing that I think it's worth us pausing about. I mean, some I's could have been better dotted and some T's better crossed. I'm not saying that there is absolutely nothing to criticize in the way that Justice Thomas has handled this issue, but he is not a corrupt man.
I didn't use that word yet.
He's a long way from being rich. A lot of people in politics are multi-millionaires. He's not one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Did he accept some gifts that he could have reported differently? I mean, I don't know, frankly, and I'm prepared to say, yes, he might have, and he well might have. Mm-hmm. But listen, this guy has been sitting on the Supreme Court for over 3 decades. He's a pillar of American law. This nitpicking, oh, he didn't dot this I, he didn't cross this T, as if he were a corrupt man. He is not a corrupt man. As if the diminishment of his person, which is what this is really about, this is an effort to discredit him as a person. He's beneath contempt. This has haunted him from day one of his service to this country. And the reason, ultimately, is he's a conservative. He's a Black man who's a conservative. He's dangerous for that reason. And people seek to discredit him. Yes, he's my friend, and I'm proud to call him that.
Yeah, we don't have to spend too much time on this. I guess the counterpoint of, you used the word corrupt twice. I haven't used it at all so far. Just to be clear, I didn't introduce the word corruption. I think the concern, and it seems like a reasonable concern, would be if one is at the highest court in the land making decisions that at a very high level affect industries, major industries of all kinds, some of the biggest industries in the country in so many ways, and someone like Harlan Crow, intimately involved in so many of those industries, is making gifts and the gifts aren't disclosed, it's reasonable to say it's more than just dotting a T. It goes to questions of, well, what decisions might we see differently had we known that a pillar of industry had made an undisclosed contribution to one of the 9 people making the decision? It seems potentially very relevant.
Okay, I can't disabuse you of that thought. That's a hypothesis that you're going to entertain. Was Thomas's performance in the law, influenced by the gratuities that might have come his way because of his relationship with Harlan Crow or others? I don't think so, but we're going to have to come to our own conclusions about that. What I want to say, though, is that he's not the only person with rich friends.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
There are a lot of people with rich friends. Some of them are sitting in the Oval Office of the United States of America. They're everywhere I look. Politics is, I'm going to use the word corrupt again, in a much more central way. We pay these people a pittance. The people who are serving our government are paid $300,000 or $400,000 a year. I'm sorry for the way it sounds, but in Power Alley America, that's not a lot of money.
That's true.
How did Nancy Pelosi get to be Nancy Pelosi? With due respect, I don't mean any disrespect in saying that. I'm saying she's not any different than anybody else in that game. So that's why I say let's try to keep perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, Glenn, the reason that to me is a concern is it sounds like you're sort of saying, even if it was wrong, he doesn't make that much money compared to other people, therefore it's okay, which if it violates the canons of judges, it violates the canons of judges.
I'm not conceding that point at all. What was wrong? That he changed his vote for some gratuity? I don't believe that for a minute.
No, I'm not making that argument.
Excuse me, let me just say this, David.
Yeah.
His principled justification for his jurisprudence has a foundation that's a quarter century old. He didn't just come to the view because somebody passed some bucks to him under the door. That's what he actually believes.
Yeah, no, and to be clear, my only point was that when you say it's really not that big of a deal because at the end of the day, these people are underpaid, it sounds like a justification rather than an actual defense of the action.
No, all I mean to say is if you're Stephen Breyer, retired justice of the Supreme Court, if you're Ruth Bader Ginsburg or somebody like that, and I don't mean any disrespect to these people.
Okay.
You have rich friends. Okay. So that is what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm just saying Justice Thomas is no different in that respect than a large number of people serving at the top of American government who have rich friends.
Yeah, I'm not aware of other Supreme Court justices who, while on the court, received gifts that were supposed to be disclosed, but they didn't. That's a material difference. Will you concede that?
Well, I would if I were going to concede supposed to be disclosed, and I understand that that's in dispute, but okay, you know.
All right, that's fine. So I want to talk to you a little bit about wokeness and cancel culture. I am not what I think is perceived by some to be part of the woke or cancel culture left. I am not big on using identity to silence. I am big on understanding how identity might give an interesting perspective. I, as a Jewish person, may have experiences of anti-Semitism that someone else doesn't. So it seems relevant to listen to me, but I don't get to use my identity as a cudgel to silence others. That's been my view on the identity politics issue. I'm curious whether you are seeing that the woke cancel culture wing of the left, which I argue is relatively small, but we can talk about that. Has it peaked and things are starting to swing the other way? I'll tell you anecdotally, I'm seeing more and more people with my brand of leftism, which is skeptical of the cancel everyone, speech policing, identity politics stuff. I'm glad to see that as someone on the left who doesn't like that. Where do you see that movement right now?
Well, I'm actually married to somebody on the left. Her name is Loury, my lovely wife. And she's very much on the left. And she actually shares the sentiment that you just gave voice to about cancel culture. She thinks it's passe. And, you know, she's much more interested in $25 an hour minimum wage or whatever than she is in policing what words somebody is speaking or whatever. So, and she's not alone. I'm sure that she's not alone. And yeah, I think it's kind of peaked for a number of reasons, you know, but I think the impulse to censor, the censoriousness, if you will, is about moral superiority. It's about being, you know, better than those people. It's about a way of drawing the line and showing that I'm on the right side of the line. And I think that that's a deep-seated tendency. I don't necessarily see that that's going away. I mean, I was involved in this to a certain degree at Substack, at the platform where my newsletter and whatnot, because there's some Nazi stuff that was small, not very much following, but nevertheless, And the question was, do you step away from Substack because there are a couple of these platforms with these very, noxious and despicable kind of political views, white supremacists or whatever like that. And I thought not. I mean, the Substack management had made the decision, not at least at first, to step away from to ban these sites, and there was
Right.
pressure to ban the sites. They ultimately relinquished on that to that pressure, and so it was an issue. But I thought as it was going on, I mean, it's not as if what am I trying to say? It's not as if the Nazism issue is a real issue. And these people are obviously beyond the pale. The dissociation, the need to ban, that felt to me more like a kind of virtue signal, like a kind of, demonstration of where we stand, and it's not real politics. It's not engaging anything that's kind of on the ground. It's all about performance, and
In this context, the last thing I wanted to ask you about is, what is your outlook for what the country is facing with the November election? Because you can find every opinion on the spectrum. This is no big deal no matter who wins. Presidents don't have real power, all the way to Trump is an authoritarian wannabe who would make an attempt to completely go even further in doing away with the norms we've previously associated with the presidency. What do you think is at stake 10 months from now?
Oh God, I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you my foreboding. I think,
Yeah.
in some way, the future of the country is at stake. And I don't say that in the straightforward way that Trump is the threat, and if he wins, democracy's over. I think that's a silly argument. I think the question is, will the results of elections be accepted? I don't think that's true if Trump wins, and I don't think it's true if he loses.
In other words, people won't accept it either way?
Yeah. Here's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's no outcome of the election that's going to be regarded as legitimate by a large enough proportion of the population to prevent there from being severe threat to the integrity of our institutions. And that's a problem no matter who wins.
You're saying even if Trump has a big win, the left will say it's not legitimate?
Of course. Look at all the criminal indictments against him. Look at the hysteria with which his prospect of winning is already being greeted as the end of democracy.
But wait a second. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, Glenn. There are some polls right now, hypothetical polls, that say Trump's leading Biden by 8. If the election were today, Biden leads by 8. That would be a huge win, especially for a Republican who they often lose the popular vote and win electoral.
Well, that's a point in my direction, by the way. Excuse me for interrupting you.
Yeah.
The fact that the popular vote is almost certain, given New York, California, and so forth, to go to Biden is another reason why the emanations that you heard in 2016 would be an earthquake of rumble, of resistance, and of protest against an outcome in which Trump would win, were he to, in 2024.
So my total question is, me as someone on the left, right? I see that in some polls, Trump's leading by 6 or 8. If November comes and Trump wins by 6 or 8, which would be a big victory for a Republican, and becomes president, I have no reason. It doesn't strike me at all that my reaction would be that that's not legitimate. I would be very disappointed in the American electorate, but it doesn't. I don't know anyone who would say that would be illegitimate. The polls are kind of signaling that to some degree.
I hope I'm wrong. I'd like to be wrong, but you asked me what I thought, and
of course,
so my fear was we don't get out of the election without there being something, a low-grade civil war. I don't necessarily mean arms in the streets, but I mean at each other's throats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that you're wrong.
Yeah, okay.
We've been speaking with Glenn Loury, professor of economics at Brown University. The forthcoming memoir is Late Admissions, Confessions of a Black Conservative. Glenn, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, David.